I am I'm going to start mainly just with what worship is and why is it important. Because it is a little different when it comes to kids ministry, because in kids ministry we're teaching a lot more than we're leading it, if that makes sense. Like, the kids are learning their foundations, they're learning and they're asking questions and understanding, why do we do this? Like, what is this about? And so it's important for us to understand ourselves as leaders in that aspect, what worship is. And simply, worship is adoration. It's paying reverence and honor to who God is. And it's, basically what we just did in there. We stood around and we just simply worship God by saying, God, you're this. God, you're faithful. God, you're the God above it all. But I found this definition of worship by William Temple. He wrote a book called Reading in St. John's Gospel. And he just described worship, and I just love it. Like, as soon as I read it, I was just like, oh my gosh, this just makes total sense as to why we worship, how it changes us, and just that aspect of it. So I'm going to read it to you. Again, this is William Temple, and he said, worship is a submission of all of our nature to God. It's the quickening of our conscience by His holiness, the nourishment of our mind with His truth, the purifying of imagination by His beauty, the opening of the heart to His love, and the surrender of will to His purpose. And all of this is gathered up in adoration, the most selfless emotion of which our nature is capable, and therefore the chief remedy for that self-centeredness which is our original sin and the source of all actual sin. And I just love this, because when I think about worship, I think about, it simply is about God. And we're in kids ministry, and kids are, and it says it in this quote too, that our original desire is to go towards the things that it's all about us. Like, it's about us, that's it. Like, it's our self-centeredness. That's how we were born into this world, and so that's what we cling to, and that's what he states in this. But worship is about adoration. It's everything but about us. It's about putting all of ourselves into who God is. And so I just love that, and how he just breaks that down. We're surrendering this because of his holiness. We're resetting our minds because he's truth. And so when I think about worship, ever since God truly just started changing my heart to wanting to do worship with kids, and I didn't understand it, and then he shared this story with me, and I share it every time I talk about worship, so Kevin's probably heard it a million times. But the story of Jehoshaphat, which is the coolest name ever, okay? I wish my husband would let our kids' name be that, but he won't. We've talked about it. Anyway, so the story of Jehoshaphat's in 2 Chronicles, and I'm not going to read it all to you, but I just want to share just the brief story, and some of you may read it before too, but it's in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and what happens basically is King Jehoshaphat is doing whatever kingly duties he's supposed to be doing at that time, and one of his soldiers come up to him and say, look, we just found out that these 3 nations are coming to attack you, so yeah, there's that. What are we going to do? And so, for me, I would have peed my pants and been like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? 3 nations are coming against this 1 nation. Okay. But here's what he does, is he stops and he proclaims a fast for all of Judah, for not just the leaders, but the families, the kids. He calls them all together. Says, here's what we're going to do. These people are coming toward us, but we're going to stop and we're going to worship God, because we can't do this without him. And as you read the story, you just see their prayers, that God, you rule over all the kingdom of the nation. Power and might are in your hand, and no one can withstand you. So they just stop and proclaim who God is. And I just think that's so awesome. And it gets even better as you read the story, and if you ever look at my Bible, there's even little words called BAM with exclamation points as it goes on, because it gets so exciting. Just how God works, because that they stopped and honored him. They worshipped him and knew that it wasn't about them. And so anyways, they get ready to go to battle, and he just says, we're going to keep doing this. And so he starts his army out, not with his strongest men, but with his worship leaders. And so they go out before him, and it says that they just keep singing, give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever. And so it says, as they began to sing and praise, the Lord set ambushes against the men of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who were invading Judah, and they were defeated. So it says, immediately as the songs began, God set ambushes, and every single nation that was coming at him were gone. They were destroyed. And so when Jehoshaphat and his nation come up on this mountain to where they think this battle is going to take place, there's nothing but dead people there. I mean, because God's taking care of it already. And so not once did they have to do anything other than proclaim his name. And I love this story because it is what worship is. It's about stopping. It's about recognizing that it's not about us. Not about who we are, what we can do. It's exactly about who God is and what that means for us. Like, we don't have to worry about going to battle for things because God's our defender. And so I love the story of Jehoshaphat, and it always just grabs my heart and then puts it in perspective, because teaching worship is seriously the most challenging thing with kids, because again, it's their nature to want to cling to themselves. It's about me. It's about what God can do for me. It's about me. Everything's about me. If you've ever met a kid, everything they do is about them. But worship isn't. It's completely the opposite. It's about clinging to the fact that it's about God. And so worship can be very challenging in that aspect in teaching kids, but it's also the most rewarding, because just like this story, when they understand that it's not about them, that it is about God, and they stop and they realize that and they apply that to their life, it has literally the power to change everything. Because they realize, I'm not doing this alone. I don't have to fight. God is my defender. I have peace. I don't have fear because God didn't give me that. And so they realize that it's not about them. It's about God, and that literally has the power just to change things. And I love it because it changed it in the story. And so I love that that's what we start each week with, is worship. Because immediately we honor God for who he is. We welcome him into this place. And then he takes reign over anything else that's going over there. And so that's just the basic, my heart behind what worship is and why it's important. Because it is challenging, but it's also so rewarding when the kids get it, because it really has the power to change things for them. But why do we do worship in Kid Life? Like, what is the purpose of worship in Kid Life? It's not just about songs every week. It's not just about getting up there and having fun. It really is so much more to that. And so I'm sure you guys have talked about just the vision of Kid Life, but just to restate it, Kid Life's vision is to build a godly foundation in the lives of school-age kids. And it's also, as part of that vision, we teach truths of Kid Life. And one of those truths is God's character, who God is. We take time to explain that. We build series around it. And that is part of worship. I mean, when we think about worship, or when I think about worship, I go back to the purpose of Kid Life, the vision of Kid Life. We're here to set down a foundation, and that's why we have to take time to teach worship, not just lead it. Because they need to understand why do we raise our hands? Why do we, all sit still during this time? Why do we get quiet? They don't understand that, and they need to know, because that's the purpose, that's the vision behind what we're doing as a ministry, is teaching them how to build that godly foundation. And then worship is all about God, so the truth of Kid Life is we want to teach them who God is, and that's the perfect opportunity during worship to take place there. So teaching worship gives us the opportunity to continue to lay down that foundation and define who God is and what that means for them as his children. And in Romans 12, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." Bless you. So when I think about the purpose of Kid Life, or worship in Kid Life, I think about that verse, and that we're laying down this foundation, so we're teaching them what different aspects of worship is. How can you do it? What does it mean? And this verse just kind of sums it up to you, that we offer our bodies as sacrifices. We're holy and pleasing God. It's our spiritual act of worship. But that last line says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, which is that it's about us. It's not about us. It's about God. And we transform our mind by setting our mind on those things through worship. And it says, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So when kids can understand worship, and that it's not about them, it's about God, they can begin to apply that to their daily lives, so that when tests come and when they leave Kid Life, and this is what we always talk about, when we put these truths, and everything that we give them, they're like, this is truth. This is right. He said it. They're taking it all in. But when they leave Kid Life and they get older, Kevin says that they dump it out on the floor, and then they're trying to figure out what that is. But if they can understand worship, and that it's not about them and it's about God, and they set their minds they have that habit of that godly lifestyle to do that, then they'll be able to test and approve those things and know that it's God's will because they're worshiping Him, they're seeking out who He is, and they're focusing on that. So I love that verse and that it challenges us and reminds us that purpose of what we're doing here in Kid Life. So how do we do that? How do we lay down that foundation? I mean, because it seems like that's a lot to try to teach them how to worship all on just some fun songs. And it can be, but it's super fun, and that's what I love about it. So when I think about how we lay down that foundation, how we teach God's truth, it's all about the songs that we pick and how we do it. So we pick songs that are God-centered. So when you pick songs, you want to pick songs that are reflecting who God is, that are speaking His character, that are fun, but also just magnify who He is in a fun and enjoyable way, because the Bible says constantly, to sing of God's good things, to praise Him, to give glory to His name. He is wonderful and good. His love endures forever. And so we want to teach them to sing those things, to sing about who God is and have fun with it. And but also, when you're picking songs, like each series we have, Kevin will give me the main points. And there's a central message within those main points. And so you want to figure out that central message, and then you want songs that are going to reflect that. Because one of the funnest things to do with kids is repetition. Because the more you do it, the more it gets in their head. And when you have songs that are backing up what you're teaching, then it's just a fun way for that to get in their head. Because then they're singing the songs, but that message is still there. And they're still having fun with it. So keep songs that are God-centered. Especially your more focused worship songs, because that's when you really take the time to explain things. So when you're picking those more focused worship songs, which is our slower songs, you want to make sure that those songs truly glorify who God is, that magnify those characteristics, that connect with that central message of the series. So if you're teaching about obedience, then you want to sing songs that reflect God's heart for obedience, or who God is in that fact, and that He's faithful to come through. If you're obedient to what He says, He's faithful to honor you for those things. But then always remember to have fun with it, because it's fun and you want them to enjoy it. And then also with picking songs and doing worship, you want to take time to explain things. So even when you're doing like fun songs, you want to take time, like we're celebrating who God is right now, because He's the God of the universe and He's here in this room at the same time. You want to take time to explain that aspect, that, yeah, we're having fun, but there's a reason we're doing this, because God is good, and that's exciting. God gave His life for me, and that is awesome, so let's sing about it. Let's dance about it, God created fun, so let's have fun. So take time to explain what you're doing, because, again, we're laying down that foundation, so we want them to understand why we do this. Why do we raise our hands? Why do we sing like this? Why do we look silly while we do it? Well, because God's fun, and we want to have fun and honor Him for that. So take time to explain. Why do you raise your hands? What are you singing about? If there's a song, and just like last week, we finished our series Go, which was about going into all the world. And the song was God of Angel Armies. And it doesn't necessarily talk about going into all the world, but it talks about, the message was having the strength and the courage to go and tell other people about God. Well, you can have that strength because God is with you. You have no reason to fear. God's with you. He'll give you the words, and He'll direct you if you trust Him. So let's honor God for that. Let's sing this song about who He is and who He'll be in that situation for me. So explain what you're singing about. And if it's about a characteristic of God, like if there's one certain song that, God, you're faithful. Well, or just like that song, God, you're the God of angel armies. Take time to make sure that you point that out. God is the God of angel armies. Like, He is the mighty defender who leads us. Explain that, because then you're understanding not just, oh, God is faithful, but why is God faithful? What does that mean? Like, explain that. And it doesn't have to be long. You want to keep it simple and short, because kids don't focus very long. It lasts very short. So you want to make sure that you always keep it sweet and simple, but you also want to make sure that you do take that purposeful, sweet and simple time to point it out, because it is important. And then again, I said it earlier, but explain, why is this time special? Why do we set it apart from the other worship songs? Why do we stop what we're doing and just instead of having fun and dancing around, why do we stop and be still? Why do we close our eyes? Why do we raise our hands? Why do we not talk to our neighbor during this time? Because we want to honor God for who he is. We want to be reverent to his holiness. And so you want to take time to just explain that this is a really special time. Like, the God of the universe is here to talk with you right now. He's here to meet with you, so let's just be still and not worry about anything else. Let's just talk to that God, because he's here. And so it's really simple, and you just really want to take the purposeful initiative to point out those things so that they understand what's going on. They understand why we're doing it. And then also, one thing that we started just within the past year or so is using different teaching methods. Doing activities during worship. You don't always have to do a song. And that's what I've loved, and one of the things that God really put on my heart that we're teaching them. And so you want to take those times where we're not just singing that focused worship song, but we're teaching them how to worship during that time. So we're teaching them, this is what it's like. So you can stop, and there's different ways that you can do that, and we'll talk about some more in just a second. But, I mean, we've done things where we've journaled, and we'd stop and say, okay, right now let's just take out our journals, and let's say who God is. Who is God to you? What is a promise that God has given us? And usually we'll take up whatever message we've given that week. So if we said that God promises to be faithful, well, then let's write that down. God is faithful. How have I seen God be faithful? And so we take that point just to break it down and allow the kids to make it personal. To teach them that it's personal. It's about the God in their lives. And so they can explain that. Do prayers. You can sit there for an entire song and just pray out loud. Lead them in those prayers so that they can start understanding how to do it themselves. Bless you. You can do pictures. Pictures are great with kids because it gives them an opportunity to draw. You can point pictures out. Just different ways where you give them opportunities to share things that God's done in their lives. We've done that once, and it was so cool. I don't know how many of you have met McLean Heisler, but I was his partner one time when we did this activity. And tell you, this kid had an awesome experience with God, and he was just like, yeah, God showed up for me. He did this, and it was cool. And I was like, what? God did that for you? You're like, how old? 6? I mean, it was cool, and he like understood it. And so sharing about who God is and who he's been in your life is an awesome way for the kids to worship God and to understand that it's fun to share who God is. So there's just different activities, and you just always want to remember that you're teaching them as much as you're leading them. You don't just get up there and do songs, but you take time to explain, to give them a reason, to get them focused, which is, again, hard but fun. So yeah. So just, there's some why, what is, and how. And so I'm going to give you guys this. Pass these around. Or you pass that one again. So we're going to just go through this together. And so again, we've talked about what worship is, why it's important in kid life, and then how we lay down that foundation and teach truths. And so now it comes to the actual doing part of kid life, where you pick out your songs and your emotions. And I didn't write this on here, but I definitely want to point it out, just some resources. When I start thinking about songs we're doing for the series, again, you always want to get your main point for the series and just that central message that you're trying to reach across to these kids. So I take that, and then I get with my team. My team meets once a week. And we'll say, okay, here's our upcoming series. What are some really cool songs that you've heard lately? What's a song that you've maybe just been on your heart or your mind a lot? What are those songs? You want to write those down, and you might not use any of them, but it's still good to let your team in. And, of course, you may use all of them because they might not be any songs that you've heard, and they're awesome and perfect. But anyways, so use the resources of other people. I mean, take time to hear what or ask kids, I like to ask Anna, who is fun. Anna and Finn like to say, Anna suggested Justin Bieber, which we can't do in here, but it's fun because sometimes they hear songs and they'll sing them like, ooh, I really like this song. Or we haven't done it in a while, but they've heard it, in the pre-service mix, and they're like, I really like that song. What about doing that song? And it's fun because then they enjoy it. So take time to make sure that you ask kids, ask your team, and just get different ideas. But also use K-Love, because it's an awesome free resource. I like to use K-Love. A lot of our families listen to K-Love in their cars. And so not only are you using that free resource, because sometimes they give out free songs, they have lyrics and all that good stuff on there in their music room on their webpage, but also that's an opportunity again for repetition. Because if you're using a song that they'll hear in the car on the way to school, that's perfect, because they're, oh, we sing this in Kid Life, and we've been talking about this, and so it gives them that opportunity not just to worship here, but to take that outside of here and do that with their family. Because then, mom's not going to turn the radio if their kid's busting out that song loud, not only because they want to hear them sing hilariously, but it's just fun, and you do that with your kids, and it's a simple way to interact as a family in worship. And even those families that don't listen to K-Love or whatever other Christian radio, I know there's another one, I just never, yes, that one. Then, one day they could be turning the station in their car trying to find something, and then they hear that song they heard in Kid Life, and they're like, oh, Mom, I know that song, let's listen to that. So it's an awesome free resource that allows you the opportunity to give them that chance to worship outside of church, outside of where we always do it, but in a place that they can do it on their own. So it's just a cool resource to use. So sorry I didn't put that in the little notes that I gave you, but there you go. Anyway, so in Kid Life we use two types of worship songs. We used to call them Fast and Slow, but I don't like that. Again, because God just put on my heart that we need to really be purposeful in this, and that it's more than just fun songs that we're singing. So I like to call them high energy worship songs, which are our faster, energetic songs that create fun when we're praising God for who He is. But then we also have the focus worship, which I've said quite a bit. But it's just our slower paced songs that give us the opportunity, again, to take time to explain, to get time to just focus on who God is. So those are the types of songs that we use. And we usually always do 2 energy songs a week and then 1 focus worship. So when you're selecting your songs, again, make sure you use your resources. But also, when you decide whether or not you're going to choose a song or do a worship activity, again, remember to choose songs that are God-centered. Choose songs that have a clear message, clear and simple. Choose songs, again, that have that central message for the series, and then choose songs that have the appropriate timing. Sometimes songs are really good, and I'll pass them to Kevin, and he's like, this is way too long. Because I just hear the little bit that I listen to it, and then I don't ever listen to it again. So that's where Kevin comes in. He's like, no, you can't do a 6-minute songs with kids. Not going to work. Which is brilliant, because, again, kids don't focus that long. So make sure that they have that appropriate timing that keeps it simple and short. I say that a lot, but it's really good with kids because you keep it simple, focused around one thing, and they're more likely to get it than if you draw it out and make it longer or anything like that. So remember, God-centered, clear messages. They connect with that central message for whatever series you're doing, and again, that they have appropriate timing. And then when you create motions, again, what I like to say, simple and fun. Keep it simple and fun. Didn't really word this correctly on here, but use motions that are gender neutral. A lot of the times we'll get in this habit of doing the same motions and we don't realize that the guys may not be comfortable like shaking their booty or doing a little girl pose or something. So make sure that you take the opportunity to really be purposeful in making motions that both girls and guys can enjoy. Because then it gets them more involved and allows them to do that. And when you have guy DJs or dancers on the stage, it allows them not to look completely silly, and the guys are like, no, he looks awkward, I'm not doing that. So there's purpose in that. So be aware of that. Also, just remember, it's not about the motions as much as it's about the message of what you're doing. Again, you're teaching. You're laying that foundation out. You're teaching who God is. So if motions are awkward or if they're simple, it's totally fine because it's not about the motions. Because when you get up there, you're in worship yourself. And so you don't want to be caught up on remembering these crazy motions. You want to have fun. You want to worship God yourself. And that'll reflect the kids when you're caught up in that message more than you are the motions. So just remember that, because it can get crazy sometimes, and my team's like, no, this is way too much. We just need to stop. And so we have to do that, and that's what I'm thankful for, that I don't do it alone, because they're really